Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first IRMS Public Sector event of 2024. We're really looking forward to an information-packed programme over this year. So it gives me great pleasure to invite Alison North to kick us off in 2024. For those of you who have never met Alison, and I can't imagine that there can be many of you, Alison is a leading light in the records management profession and was a founder member of the IRMS. And so she has been in from the beginning, so has lots of interesting stories to tell about how the IRMS started. But Alison has, over a number of years, brought new and exciting things to the public sector group, and part of that has been about how if records managers want longevity, they need to stay relevant. And I have to admit that over the years, Alison has given me an awful lot of very useful hints and tips about how to stay relevant in the profession. So without any more ado, I'm going to hand over to Alison to take us through the next hour. If you do have any questions, could you please pop them in the chat, and we will follow them in the chat and try and get them answered as well as we can. So over to you, Alison.
Oh, well, thank you, Elizabeth. It's nice to be back in the fold again, and certainly the public sector. I used to absolutely love those sessions in London, and they were a joy, really, because it was nice to meet everybody and talk about things that I was passionate about, and hopefully give some ideas to people. Today, I'm going to be talking, now I've called them associated skills. In this modern world of changing terminology, soft skills seem to have been tossed out in my world, and they seem to have been replaced with the word associated. And I always have a slight challenge with extra skills and things. There's a long list of them, and which ones are relevant, which ones aren't. So today I'm going to set myself up for a bit of a fall. I'm not actually going to be talking about every associated skill on the IRMS skills matrix. I'm just going to be talking a little bit about communication, which is why I'm saying I'm setting myself up for a fall, because if I don't communicate to you lot very well, then you'll say, well, I don't know what she was talking about. I'm also going to talk about believe and believe in yourself, and all that does to help, because I think we don't necessarily always believe in ourselves. And then something I did for the IRMS public sector actually in November 22 was strategic thinking. I'm just going to recap that first slide statement, because strategic thinking to me is fluid these days. It's not 5-year planning. And then I'm going to talk about leadership. And the reason I'm going to talk about leadership is it's kind of one of my pet things. I'm really, as I grow older by the minute, I really am looking for people who want to take over the leadership roles and be the leading lights for the Records and Information Management Society, way better than I've ever been, committed and pushed forward. It is a good time to do this. Mind you, it's always a good time in my book, but I think it is particularly a good time, especially we've got the conference coming up soon. And then we've got this new IM Tech Summit, which I hope you're all publicising to get people to come to and bring along new members. Bring a member, bring somebody new and get them to sign up. So leadership, yes, and then obviously I'll summarise everything. So setting myself up right from the start for a fall, let's talk a little bit about communication. So the gift of the gab. Well, it is with me the gift of the gab, because I think I was born a salesman. Although having said that, possibly not. I don't think I gained my salesmanship badges until I was probably about 14, when I suddenly turned into this horrific teenager, a little bit later than some people, but became very opinionated and started to communicate to everybody, and quite persuasive and quite annoying, because I kept asking why, which turns out to be quite a good trait when you're older, but maybe not so good when you're a teenager, because it drives everybody mad. So the gift of the gab, yes, definitely had that. But communication, it's written, spoken, it's about influencing and understanding. In our world, we have to understand other people's purpose and how their work fits into our overall businesses. The other thing I think we have to learn about is how they learn and what they best respond to. But it's more than that. Again, it's communicating, and it's getting the point across. And I suppose what I'm really saying is that communication, it's all right to say, well, I'll communicate in writing or in word or visually, whatever. But is it the right message? We're in a people-focused profession. Even though you think we deal with data, we deal with information, we're technology people, we are actually doing all this for people. And we are also having to teach people about our profession. It's one of the few professions where you give away your skills to everybody else so that they can manage their work. That's not really very common. So you learn how to do it, and then you have to teach everyone else how to do it. So you have to be able to communicate, and you have to have excellent communication skills, delicate persuasion, dare I say, negotiation, and in some cases mediation, in order to get two or more parties to understand. I recall a project I was doing with a pharmaceutical company where there were two, and I say opposing parties because they seemed to be talking about backups. And they just had no idea. They were both talking about completely different things, because back up to one person was something completely different and back up to another person. So, you know, building that and being able to mediate across that and be able to explain to people and get them to understand that side of the communication. And so having that ability to explain things simply and why things need to be done is very important, to get an enterprise-wide approach to certain parts of our work. Building trust also via communication is a given. Honesty, absolutely of paramount importance. And patience while your subject learns. I think patience is definitely a virtue sometimes in our world. But I think also we do things a particular way. Everybody has their own way of doing things and their own background. And it's not necessarily the way somebody else learns. I'll come to that a bit later on. And over the years, I've been working, much of my work has involved some kind of facilitation during this role. So the role of facilitator has taught me how to bring groups together to get consensus on difficult matters, the consideration of opposing opinions, the offering of solutions to suit all parties, all within the time limitations of a scheduled meeting. So that communication, again, is important. What is the point you're trying to make? And knowing when to defer a decision and when to move for closure is also part of your job. So the communication is two-way. You have to listen. I always find it really difficult when you can't actually see anybody on the screen. I don't think I'll ever get fully used to delivering online. I feel like I'm talking to a whole lot of ghosts. So forgive me if I drift off into Never Neverland. I'm a bit of a dreamer sometimes. Someone's put their finger up. Yeah, absolutely. I'd rather be with you. Anyway, communication. What's correct? You know, what are you delivering? What are you saying? One of the things I learned very early on was not to actually talk about something I didn't know about, because I did have a bit of a habit of that when I was younger. And I would go off on one, and then I'd get halfway through something and I think, actually, I don't really know that much about this. Why am I talking about it? So, you know, are you delivering correctly? Is it fact, or is it interpretation of fact that you're putting into a method or process or a specific way of working? You need to get that very clear, and if it's relevant. So the communication to the people you're working with is what are you delivering today, and is it relevant to the listener or the audience? Take me today, for instance. Okay, as I say, I've set myself up talking about communication. What expectations did you have? I have no earthly idea when you logged on what you expected to hear about. I was just asked to give a talk about associated skills. So I've chosen to bring along something new, I hope to most of you towards the end of the presentation. At the moment, I'm talking about things that everybody knows about, but at the end, hopefully we'll get something new to talk about. But did I misunderstand the brief? Am I not sticking to the script? I do have a tendency to go off on one. Hopefully I come back into the mainstream again. And does that annoy you? Well, it might do. Have I delivered something which is completely off point? Am I being concise? Am I waffling and not really getting anything across? And is it going to be easily understood? So no jargon, no abbreviations. That's really hard these days because everybody's got an abbreviation. I mean, I remember I struggled very early on with things like FOMO, etc. Why on earth do we have to do that? Now everybody knows what that is now. But fear of missing out, just in case there is anybody in the audience who doesn't know. But it's really hard in our world not to start talking abbreviations and start talking technical terms. And we have to remember that's not a good way to communicate to generally to everybody. The other thing is building the story within the context of the subject matter, or the purpose. So is a powerful way to get a message across to many people. But I must confess, I quite often switch off during a story, especially if it goes on too long. And I've got one of those at the end, if I manage to get to that point. So you may all switch off. But some stories just aren't really that important. And some people don't like to hear about you, the speaker. Some people do. It's actually very difficult to judge. And again, going back to being online, communicating online without the audience participation of the body language and the response to what you're doing, being able to ask questions in the middle of this presentation, which I actually like better than waiting to the end for questions. But that is really hard as a communicator. As I said, am I getting it right? And I think as well, the thing that I've discovered over the years is that moving on to things like learning styles, we all know there are different learning styles now. When I started out, nobody really talked about how other people learn. You just talked and you hope that you hit the mark. But if you were a visual presenter or someone who spoke a lot or someone who read the presentation, did that hit home with the audience? A number of the audience might not really want to do that. And if you think about it, this type of presentation online is okay visually, although I don't write a lot of words on the screen. It's okay if you can hear, and you like to hear, and you like to hear somebody else's voice, and you can read, and you can scribble notes, which is fine, but you can't actually do this. So if you're, I can't even say it, kinesthetic learner, where you learn by doing, which I am actually, you can't really do that if you're listening to a presentation. And I think that not everybody learns from handbooks. I remember hearing a story, we give people handbooks, we write handbooks in our world, we say, here's a set of this, or here's a toolkit, and it's written and people have to read it. But I do remember a story of someone who's it's slightly neuro, I don't know if you can be slightly neurodiverse. I'm very wary of using terms like that without the knowledge behind it, but someone who perhaps finds it hard to read through a handbook and then forgets very quickly. They are definitely someone who likes doing. And if they're in a job where they're given a handbook to learn something, they may never get it. They have to do it by trial and error themselves. And quite often, those people have a lot to bring to the table and can communicate much better through showing you something, how to do it, rather than talking. So you have to be really aware of when you're communicating, being able to hit the mark with all these different people. And as I said, I don't like loads of words on my slides, but that may not suit you. So my comms may be skewed in the wrong direction for you. And I've tried the here's lots of information. I've tried here's just a picture. And I've tried the style I come up with now, which is a few headlines to talk to. But that requires an audience that is going to read the slides, possibly write notes, perhaps. Not someone who's going to be comfortable with this necessarily if they're a doing person. And I think personality as well comes into a lot of this. So personality, when you're communicating to somebody, personality and behavior changes dependent on the context a person is in. So what kind of day they're having, who else might be in the room. You may be an extrovert one day and an introvert the next. You might be disagreeable one day and disgruntled, or enthusiastic and accepting. Every day brings a different you. And in an audience participation presentation, for instance, although I'm not limiting communications to presentations, but you can see that, and you can see the room move, and you can see when there's an uncomfortable move by the people sitting there fidgeting, and you can see when they're not listening, and you get a general thing. So you can change things, and that's changing in the moment, having the ability to communicate, not stick to the script because the script isn't working, but actually moving around that. And that I'll come back to that a bit later on in the leadership side of things. And then I also think that we can be very good sometimes at listening, but then we can be not so good. And I think you have to consider how your standard method of delivery might affect someone who's perhaps had that bad day, and they don't want to listen to you. They want to talk to you. They want to say something, and you're not letting them because you're all about, I've got to explain this, I've got to explain this. So it's really, communication is actually very, very different and very, very difficult in our situation, where we're having to possibly teach people new skills, possibly get them to understand our angle about data and information. There's a lot going on, and then all the fears and publicity around communicating via chat, via AI. Excuse me. You know, all of that is thrown in the mix now and comes with as well. So we've got a lot of things to think about when it comes to communicating a message across. But to me, the human communication, the human to human communication, is definitely a lot about listening to what people are saying and being aware of how people are feeling when you actually deliver your message, so that you can adjust it and so that you can make it easier for them to understand. I'm not going to witter on it anymore about communication at this point. I'm going to move into my next point, which is about belief and believe. So thinking about this, that there's been a lot recently about the word believe. I don't know if any of you are Ted Lasso fans. I must confess, I thought it was a football program, and I thought, I'm never going to watch this, but I really got hooked in it, and I really liked it, and it's become, you know, incredibly big, and a lot of the sayings in it had resonance with people. And they had a believe sign. For those of you who haven't seen it, there's a big believe sign at the top of the manager's or the coach's door, in where the football team is sitting, and it's really quite amusing. But that's they hit this sign as they go out to play, or they tap it as they go past, and it's a trust in themselves, it's a belief in themselves, it's a belief in a team that originally didn't actually believe they could do anything. And I think we really find it hard to believe in ourselves sometimes and our ability to do things. But you know, if we don't believe in ourselves, can we believe in our team? Can we believe in our company, our enterprise? Can we get people to believe in what we're saying? So it kind of moves me into the confidence area, really, and how we might build our confidence. So I think it's something which grows over time. Definitely, you're not born with the confidence of the world on you. You learn it in a way. It becomes part of your makeup. And I think you need to understand what makes you tick. So what is it that you are about? What are your beliefs, your strengths? You know, how do you perform as a person, and what do you think? Now, interestingly enough, the very first job, well, interesting to me, maybe not so much to you, but the very first job I had in the oil and gas industry, they did a training course called the well, we called it the contemptible supervisor, but it was called the contemporary supervisor. And one of the things that you had to do is you had to give these handwritten forms out back in the day for people to fill in that worked within your team. So they could either be people who worked with you in the team where you were their supervisor or whatever, or people who worked above you as your bosses, or colleagues, generally peers across the business. And one of the questions was understanding what makes you tick, and the difference between what people saw about you and what you saw about yourself was incredible. And some people were like, oh, I didn't think I was good at that. I didn't know. They thought, oh my goodness, because they didn't believe in themselves. They didn't believe they could do something, and they were quite shocked. So it's getting that understanding, and it's worthwhile saying to people, what do you think? How do you think I do my job? How do you think, you know, and get them to talk to you and get them to talk about your strengths as well. I think also challenging yourself, so doing something outside of your comfort zone, is really important as well. So if you can do something that you're not necessarily keen to do, like scrubbing the kitchen floor, you know, that challenges me every Saturday morning, I tell you, especially with dogs and a cat. But no, I'm joking, but you know what I mean. It's trying to do something a bit more momentous, like my husband, for instance, who at 80 has taken up CrossFit. Don't laugh, he really has. He's followed me into the CrossFit gym, and he's doing brilliantly. and he's become a bit of a guru. He's gone viral on one of the social media platforms, CrossFit affiliates, which I'm sure Shona's on the call. She will know what that is. So it's quite funny, really. But yes, so he challenged himself with something he really wasn't comfortable with doing. And I'm not suggesting you all go to CrossFit gyms, but there are other things you can do. Lifelong learning is another thing. So again, I mentioned earlier on about asking the question why. I really want to learn as much as I can, and as you get older, you realise how little you know, and so you've got all these things that are so exciting. And we're actually, because of the business we're in, I think a lot of us are interested in reading things. So we do, and we gather information quickly because we're kind of a bit of a jack of all trades across various things. I think that we're naturals at learning new subject matter. So I think it's really important we do that to build our confidence so that we know about other things, broaden us as people. Supporting others actually builds confidence too. So helping other people to do something and getting them to move forward when possibly they're stuck. And I think that's quite important as well. I'm a very positive person. So, and I know not everybody is, and I know that it's not necessary, and I know that, you know, it's not everybody's bread and butter, but if you can maintain a can-do attitude, in other words, it's not necessarily saying I'm going to be the best at this. It's saying I can try and I can do the best I can. I think if you maintain that attitude, then that also builds your confidence, because as soon as you get a success, it's great. You feel really good. I see there are some hands up. I don't know how that's. I think I've noticed a little hand went up somewhere, but I think the questions Elizabeth asked if they stay to the end. Sorry about that. And then the other thing is something that not many of us, and even me, who's got the gift of the gab, frankly, I'm not that keen to speak up about my successes. I'm kind of depend on other people to do it for me, which is possibly not really the greatest thing. There's nothing wrong with telling people where you've had success in the appropriate setting. So when somebody says, well, what have you done? Don't hide your light under a bushel. Speak up about what you've done. Speak up about where you've been and what you like and how that's helped you move forward in your career. We are so quiet in the records and information management industry. We really don't speak up enough about our successes. We need more people to shout from the rooftops. And I think that's really important. So I think building confidence is a set of is a skill in itself. And it's not a comfortable skill necessarily. But I think it's a really important skill to move through your career and to get you towards possibly a leadership role, which I'll come on to in a minute. Let me see now what we go. Oh yes, and I nicked this from Dean Koontz. I tweaked his quotation slightly. Everyone has a talent, and I really believe this. Everyone has a talent, an ability, or a skill that can be mined to succeed in life. And let's not measure success by money, okay? Success isn't always about how much money you make, although a lot of people seem to think it is. And I think also, you don't need to have that skill when you're 20 or 30, 40 or 50. And it may not be the one you're thinking about. You may yet have to find it. There really is no age limit. I recall when I was in my 40s, I think it was, I discovered there was a lady called Mary Wesley, who's an author. She'd begun writing when she was about 57, but she didn't get her first book published until she was 70. And then she became a hugely best-selling novel. And she published her first one, I say, when she was 70, and she went on to produce a string of slightly racy bestsellers, which examined as was in those days, the middle class. And she was described as a bit like Jane Austen with sex. Excuse me if I hope I'm not offended anybody. She died when she was 90. So even if you start something in the 70s, you can go on 20 years doing it. So you don't really have to find that talent, ability, or skill tomorrow, but you do have one, and maybe it's life will teach it to you, and then you will be able to succeed. So building on your confidence, thinking it's never too late. It really isn't too late. And I've met a lot of people recently, working with some young people in the FSB, the role I have as a director on the board of small businesses. We work a lot with scale-ups and growing businesses, and getting to young people who some of them are almost panicking that they haven't actually scaled up yet to have 5 people. And I keep thinking, why are you in such a rush? You don't have to do this quickly. You know, if you've got something you want to do and you do believe in it, and you're ready to scale up, that's fine. But it doesn't have to happen to everyone. Just because you want to sit at, you've got a business that works from home, you create or make something, doesn't mean to say you have to run a business that's got 5 people. I think it's the same with our world. As long as we're doing our job and we're happy doing our job, and we're in an environment where we're using our skills and to the best of our ability, that's success. That is definitely success. If you're happy doing something, you've definitely succeeded. So anyway, I'm going to pause at a break there, not pause, I'm not going to stop because I can't ask you any questions, but that's kind of draws a line between the 2 halves of the presentation. I'm going to move on to leadership, but I'm going to have a short stop at strategic thinking, and something I said back in November 22 to a very similar audience. Maybe some of you were in that session. Strategic thinking considers, to me, it's an ability to plan for the future to start off with, and it's fluid now. It's not necessarily a plan that goes for 5 years. You have to be able to act in the moment so it flows quickly. And it considers, obviously, new techniques, technology for the future. It encourages intuitive and creative thinking. I think that's really important to understand that now that's about strategic thinking. And it encourages interaction with others, including people from all levels in the organisation. So I think it's important to revisit that briefly before I just move into leadership. And if I was talking to you now in face-to-face, I'd be saying to somebody, so have we got any comments on that? So think about that for the questions later on, perhaps. But taking that point and then moving into the leadership side of things, I'm going to try and connect some associated skills to leadership through a slightly different lens, a different way to look at developing yourself by establishing a positive intention and tapping into energies we all possess. So I'm going to go off on one into energy and centering yourself. Now, this is not a yoga session because I'm not very good at meditation, namaste, but really I would like to be, but I'm really not very good at it. So it's not going to be quite there, but it is along the lines of thinking about how you perform using your energies. And I'll speak about the energies in a minute. Now, this is not my brainchild, okay? It's a method called Leadership in Flow, which has been around since about 2006, I believe, started at Columbia University. And forgive me, I have no idea how to pronounce this person's name. It's Hitendra Wadhwa of the Mentora Institute. And recently there was it reminded me of it because I read about it before, but it reminded me of it recently when in the Harvard Business Review. There's an article in January, February's edition of that about this. And I've taken some of that and brought that along today to read to you, actually. I'm not really given to reading many academic papers, but this method interested me because it links to some of the things I've been doing myself for many years. And it's just quite interesting, that point, because you will be doing things that you've never thought to write down and consider as the way you do things. They're just natural to you. And then later on in life, somebody comes up with a method and you think, well, that's what I do. And you think, why didn't I write that down? So a little bit of advice. If you have an idea about what you do, then write it down. You never know, it might become a method. But certainly this is something which is it had resonance with me. So what to do? Okay, so talking about leadership, and this is me, okay, so sorry, I'm going to talk about me for a little bit. I have always been purpose driven. I never like to do anything without a purpose. I said, why am I doing this? If I'm not doing it for a reason, there's not much point doing it. I'm extremely curious to the point of nosy and will always ask people questions about themselves. And when you meet somebody who does the same thing, it's quite hard to get the conversation flowing because you're both trying to ask each other about each other and it doesn't work too well. But most of the time when you when you're curious and you're asking about. It is kind of nosy, I suppose, but it's also interest because it gives you something to chat about. I always, and this is my father taught me this when I was young, find the positive before the negative. So I always look for 3 positives before I say something negative. And I look for potential in others. I'm really keen, and this has developed a lot more again as I've gone through my working life. I'm very keen to look for potential in others. What can you do? And it's not necessarily just in the workplace. It's outside that. So what else do people do? And I have to go back to sport again because sport's very big in my life, as maybe some of you know. And I mentioned the CrossFit gym, but also I'm a runner. And I came to running later in life. And I think Paul Duller's on this call. He may remember me running around San Francisco when we were on this case together. And that's driven me since my 60s. And I just started to run further and further and further. But that running, I didn't realize I had such potential in running. But it also lends to my character as well, the strengths in my character, the endurance, the ability to keep going for longer and getting stronger, never giving up. Those are the things which aren't necessarily obvious when you talk to somebody. So I look for the less obvious potential because it helps them to perhaps the way they deliver their work. And then I've got to the bottom, take a walk. Yeah, when I have a problem, yeah, I take a walk. And that's what my way of centering myself, a very popular terminology. I step back. I go, okay, let me see. I'm going to take a breath. And I learned this from when I was quite young. In my early career, I went along to a session with I'm trying to remember the name of the chap. He was quite well known at the time. He was one of these American gurus that came across and delivered, positive mind delivering presentations, etc. But the only thing, and I mean this, the only thing I really remember from all of that talk was that he said that before he did presentation, he used to take himself off, even if he didn't want to go to the loo, he'd take himself off to the loo and he'd sit on the toilet seat, up or down, I don't know, but he'd sit on the toilet seat and he would take a few deep breaths and he would calm himself down and he would center himself and then he would go back out again. And that made a huge difference to the way he delivered. If he just rushed straight into it, it never came across so good. So this slide, and you're going to say, what's this got to do with leadership? But this slide reflects my energies. But this leadership and flow method introduces 5 core energies that we all possess: purpose, wisdom, growth, love, and self-realization. I'm not going to delve into everything. It was a long article. I'm not going to delve into absolutely everything to do with these, although I may read these out. But I'll just give one basic example or action related to this. So in purpose, so it's about discovering other people's values and purpose, not just your own, and using that in the moment. So if you're, and I'll come to the example of the meeting in a minute. Wisdom. So it's about understanding and exploring all possibilities before you actually do anything. So it is preparation. And again, the type of personality I am, I jump into things very quickly. I want to, I'm getting excited and enthusiastic and I want to answer. I have learned to control that a bit because that, whilst had a purpose behind it, was too interfering with the going on of the meeting or the presentation or whatever, and drowned out other voices. So I decided I had to step back a bit and understand a little bit more about what was happening, and then to explore all the possibilities before I did something. And then there's growth. I mean, that's a combination of things about the vast, I mentioned earlier on, that are looking for vast untapped potential that exists in others, and trying to find that to help deliver the program or the process or anything that you're doing. As you know, and then I think finding love is actually in work, the love energy, connecting with those you work with and serve, and understanding that life deals bad blows and that somebody could be not in a great space today or tomorrow. Again, that's something which isn't necessarily the first thought that crosses everybody's mind. They tend to criticize before they think, well, maybe that person had a bad day. So the classic example of this is someone beeping a horn all the time in their car, and you think, why on earth are they doing that? Oh, honestly. But then you think, maybe had bad news, or maybe it's just not a great day for that person, and they're just angry. And how sad that is, really, that they have to be angry. So it's trying to get across the thoughtfulness and also being able to use that when you deliver tough decisions. And then, as I mentioned earlier on about that's self-realization. It's understanding your core identity and helping others to understand theirs. So those are what they call the 5 core energies. And as I mentioned, I do the centering by going for a walk or a run. But you may be saying, so how do you mix between skills and energies? Is it both, or is it different? Well, let me just go through the energies as described by the person that wrote this. And forgive me, as I say, I have challenges with the pronunciation of the person's name, but the reference is up there. This is just a real snapshot, because there are 5 energies and 25 actions in this method. And I'm sure when you read it, you'll say, well, actually, I would tweak that a little bit, or I'd do something else. So purpose. So it's rethink your ideas and deliver them again. So in the moment, so you've got a purpose. You say, this is what I'm doing. You go to deliver that, and then something blocks it, and you go, oh, and your reaction isn't necessarily, okay, I accept that, I'll rethink it and deliver it again. You might go, well, so why? Or you might try and argue, and the example I'll bring later on is where the argument gets heated. But if you were to step back a bit, rethink your ideas, and then deliver them again, and if you can do that, if you can teach yourself to do that quite quickly. So it's a planning process at the beginning, helping yourself to plan this and deliver it, because you've planned possibly for someone doing that, and saying they don't like the idea, go away basically and start it again. Then wisdom. When somebody says something that you don't like, the hardest thing to do is to be nice about it. But if you can find something true in what your opponent says, you actually diffuse a situation quite easily. And then you can continue on with your conversation. With growth, for me, admitting and apologizing for your mistakes is big. And it does take a while, again, sometimes to learn to do this. When you go, oh, I know we're a nation of people who say sorry when we bump into people, but do we say sorry, or is it just a reaction? And do we take accountability for the mistakes we make? And I think that is definitely a growth thing. So if you've done something and it comes out in the communication that you're involved in, can you stop and admit your mistake in front of a whole bunch of people? That takes quite a lot of energy, but it's a good thing to do, and then you can move on. In terms of connection or love, it's finding that common ground with others. So delivering your work, yes, you're using your communication skills and you're understanding that they have a different way of looking at things, but can you actually find some common ground? Can you actually find things you do agree on? And then the self-realization thing is, it's really not about you. Again, try and think that it's we add information to the way we believe things all the time. So somebody will say something and it'll be a sort of basic statement, and then you'll add a whole bunch of what ifs afterwards. A lot of people do that. But supposing this is that, and then you've built it up into a bigger thing. But you know what? The reply probably is just an innocent reply, and it's not just about you. It isn't. It's about everybody else as well. And so helping you to understand you is very important as well. It's a big subject, this, within a lot of text in this article that I will send. Actually, I think I put it in the PDF, but if I didn't, I can. The thing is certainly in the slides here, the HBR January to February, if anybody's interested. But I find it fascinating. So, parking that slightly and just rounding up on leadership. One of the things about my desire, as I said at the beginning, I think the strategic thinking bit at the beginning, my strategic thinking was around finding leaders, and whether you use developing skills to find new leaders, or whether you map these up with the energies. And as I say, I'm going to give you a little story in a minute. Whether you map these up with the energies, I don't know. That's entirely up to you, whether you take this as given, whether you could throw this out and say it's a stupid idea, what's she talking about. But I'll give you an example, and I have to read some of this because I can't remember the whole story. But in 1984, Margaret Thatcher and Mikhail Gorbachev met, and some of us may have been around then. I certainly remember it was the year my eldest daughter was born, and I was on maternity leave, so I watched the telly. He came over to Chequers, and he was seen as a potential leader of the country. This lunch that he came to ended up as a 5-hour meeting. And Margaret Thatcher, as was her wont, she was a very decisive lady, as you know, and very opinionated, immediately launched into the conversation and said, I want there to be no misunderstanding between us. I hate communism. Great start, because very quickly the argument between Margaret and Mikhail became very heated. And this is from Gorbachev telling the story later on. And he felt offended. She seemed to be accusing the Soviet Union of all sorts of unfairer things, and he hadn't accused Britain of anything. So the two turned their backs on each other in the middle of lunch, and Gorbachev's wife, actually Raisa, I think her name was, stunned by Thatcher's attack, indicated to her husband, it's over. And for a moment, Gorbachev thought they should leave. And then he had a brainwave. And it would appear he centered himself. He stepped back, took a deep breath, and centered himself. And considered why he was there. What was the purpose of him being there, and the intentions of the meeting? And he said to himself, we're guests here. The conversation has to continue. So in his mind, in the moment, he reframed the situation in his mind. He said, she's attacking my government too. She's promoting her principles. So instead of seeing it as an attack on the Russian government, or the government as it was at the time, the Politburo, etc., he saw it then as just promoting her own principles, which diffused the heat. And he turned to her and apparently said, I know that you're a person with an acute mind and high personal principles. Please bear in mind. She responded with a nod. So she responded and said yes. He then continued, let me assure you that I've not come here with instructions from the Politburo to persuade you to become a member of the Communist Party. So Thatcher burst out laughing, which released the tension. It's obviously being said in tongue in cheek, and the discussion continued, although it soon heated up again, but in a much better way. So the heat wasn't personal or an attack on a country, it was for him. And actually the meeting proved to be a turning point in the Cold War. Now, there's a much longer story to that, which you can read. But in that pivotal moment at the lunch, he changed the whole tack of the conversation by using two of his energies. So he used the fact that he self-realization about himself and the purpose, and then he created a little joke out of it, and he found common ground. So he moved forward that, and his history shows they had a good relationship, and they went on to create something that was at the time was considered very positive. So that's an example of, yes, I'm here and I've got skills in negotiation, but actually I needed to use my personal ability, my energy, my own way of working, to actually move forward. I thought it was a fascinating story. Actually, I kind of knew about it, but I didn't really know it in detail. So that explains that. Oh, I hope it does. So moving just finally, the last slide on leadership. What kind of leader do you think you are? Some leaders lead from the front. They are very innovative, and they're able to show people how to do things, and people follow them. Off they go. And then some leaders lead from behind, and I think it was Mandela who was saying to lead from the back and let others believe they are in front. So giving people the belief that they're the leaders. And it's really quite funny. My leadership style has changed from a front runner to a back runner, because now I prefer to let people believe that they're leading and I'm just following. I prefer it that way now. It's just my personality, not change, but just I've become, maybe it's maturity, maybe it's age, I don't know, just changed slightly. So think about what kind of leader you are. But we need leaders. We really need leaders in the IRMS. And I'm sure there are many of you here that with the lifelong learning and possibly using some of these energies, you could be brilliant leaders. I'm drawing to a close. I just want to mention, of course, the famous IRMS skills matrix. For those of you who don't know about it, it has a huge list, the longest list ever of associated skills, also known as soft skills. And version 1, I think, is available now. I think it's up now. And I urge you to, as members, to have a look at that. It's very interesting. It's an example. It is a really good example of teamwork. And that's one of the other things that I'm very keen on, is that people working together in teams. But that's another presentation altogether. Much more. Do you know what? I've stuck my slides. Sorry, I can't seem to move along my slide deck. Oh, there we go. It went out of the screen. Yes, so it's much more. The teamwork slides much more around projects and how you create a team and how you use your skills to run a team without a leader. That's another one altogether. But certainly I encourage you to log on and look at the skills matrix. It'll help you define what you're looking for. So just in summary, what we've talked about communication right up front, and I hope I haven't waffled on too much. I hope that I've brought you something that is a little bit different and that you might consider as something you want to do. Oh, look at that, somebody clever's found and leading it. Yeah, you see, I knew this cohort of people are bound to find the references. I knew I didn't need to worry about them. Thank you, Dee. I think it was Dee that popped up there. So we talked about communication and communicating in terms of a skill for your records management, which I think is really, really important. I also talk about belief in yourself and really believing what you're doing, and believing that you're good at it and that you know what to do, and believing you can move forward with your work and your life and in a positive way, get to the top of that mountain. And then I brought in leadership in flow, which, as I say, is very interesting topic. And finally, just briefly touched on teamwork, and look at that load of Bonnie boys there. I think the football team. I think that that just shows the joy in that photograph. To me, just show the joy of belonging to a team. And going back to Ted Lasso and his belief in his team, they certainly had a joy at the end of the 3 series. Just one more thing about me and how I suppose combine the communication and the belief and the leadership in these things here. I'm incredibly enthusiastic on my subject. And for learning and asking the question why. Those things all come together. So my enthusiasm for information of all sorts has never waned from the age of, well, when I started in the oil and gas industry, when I was in my very early 20s. So information has ruled my life ever since then, and I absolutely love the subject and everything that goes with it. And asking the question why. So that's enthusiasm. I'm typically just nosy. Yes, I have a focus on the things I like. I'm not very good at focusing on things I don't like that I have to do, like scrubbing the kitchen floor. And discipline. You know, I have a discipline. I do. So this is how I get through. And my determination, my endurance, if you like, comes through. I was determined when I was younger to work offshore because it was the right thing for not just for me, but for the company I worked for. And determination in my running. I'm actually a bit of a planner and a scheduler, so I'll create these plans and schedules. I don't necessarily stick to them, but I have instant plans, and I'm a real list maker, and that's helped me, you know, do my work over the years. One thing which is actually quite a difficult thing to do is to let go. So when I sold my company in 2011, everybody queried why I wasn't doing the golden handshake bit. Why didn't I stay around? Well, I decided that that would not have been healthy for me. I had to let the company go because it had been my baby since the 80s, and really and truly, if I didn't let that go, I wouldn't be very happy. I'd find things wrong, and it just wouldn't be good for me. But it's also willingness in things, in everyday things, when you're working of things like outsourcing, collaboration, trust. And the last thing is, oh boy, I'm a dreamer. Ideas, goals change. I daydream constantly. You can see me staring into space, and then I'll go like mad and type a one-page document about what I've been dreaming about. I just dream constantly, and I think it's a really important part of my life. And I think that's how I've got through towards the end of my career. And I'm not going to end my career because that just isn't going to happen, but towards the end. So that's me. And the final, the associated skills. There is a long list, as I said earlier in the matrix. Choosing where to start is tricky. So I'll just share two things in general, just to make it a little easier. Relevance. Don't use the list as a tick box exercise. Tick box, that's difficult to say. Tick box exercise. Really think about what you need to learn about what's good for you. And it may not be associated with the job you do at the moment, but you may see that there's a potential that you might be interested in and learn it. And belief. Choose those skills that resonate with your beliefs, your values, and your purpose. And that's it. You'll be happy to know. Thank you. Elizabeth?
Okay, thank you very much, Alison. I mean, I think all I can say is wow. There are several weeks worth of unpacking, I think, of different ideas and concepts that you've uncovered today, which is really brilliant, because I think that in terms of the way that the information and records management profession is developing, especially with AI and all sorts of other things that are coming over the horizon, that we need as records managers to actually take on board a lot of these things to keep ourselves relevant and in the game, as it were. We don't have any questions at the moment in the chat. I do apologise to everyone. At the moment, we're not able to unmute individual people to, if you would like to ask questions of Alison in person, as it were. This is a very new platform for the RMS. We are amongst the first groups to be using this. So, and those of you who know me know that my relationship with technology is not always a happy one. So I am learning very rapidly about how to manage this platform, and I'm doing fairly well. But if no one has any questions, it just leaves me to say a huge thank you to Alison for sharing her time and expertise with us. You never disappoint. I know you say always that's pressure, but you never disappoint in bringing to us and to the profession huge numbers of things to think about. And so I would like to say a huge thank you for taking the time to share with us. And if anyone has any questions that they think about at 3 o'clock tomorrow morning, for example, are you okay for them to contact you directly? You know, in everybody's brains.
No, you know me, as far as connections are concerned, I spend most of my life in pro bono roles these days, and I love helping people. That's why I joined the Federation of Small Businesses to help small businesses, but I still help the IRMS as well. I will be at the conference, and just because I've been serving on the board and also because of the award, but I'm looking forward to seeing as many people as possible. So please find me if you want to talk to me. Lovely, having you here today. Some of my old muckers there, I see Mike Pierce, Owen, forgive me, I can't see everybody. I really would like to read all these chats. I don't know how, can you say the chat for me? I need to read it all.
Yes, I mean,
thank you for all the really nice comments that everybody's leaving. It's very kind of you.
So the next event will be the 12th of June. So please look, watch this space. I'm still in the early stages of planning that event. And can I also say, for those of you who are going to be at conference, the groups are going to have a couple of tables at the fringe to just have a bit of a groups focus. So please do come and find us to learn more about the groups and how you can get more out of your membership in terms of being members of the groups. So it just leaves me to say I hope everyone has an incredibly pleasant afternoon and a wonderful bank holiday weekend, weather permitting, obviously. And I'll look forward to seeing everyone at the next event. So thank you very much, and I hope you all have a very pleasant afternoon.